On December 29, 1980, Betty Cash, her friend Cash-Landrum, and Vicky's grandson Colby were driving through the dark pine woods of Huffman, Texas. It was a routine trip home after a canceled dinner, the roads quiet and the sky vast. So they had no idea that within minutes, their lives would be irrevocably changed by a terrifying celestial encounter. The silence was broken when a brilliant light appeared above the trees. Initially they thought it was a distant airplane, but it grew with impossible speed. Within seconds, a massive diamond-shaped object descended from the clouds, hovering directly over the two-lane road and blocking their path with an intimidating, glowing presence. As the craft hovered, it emitted a series of rhythmic, fiery blasts from its underside. The temperature inside the car skyrocketed. The metal became so hot that when Vicky touched the dashboard to steady herself, her hand left a mark. The air grew thick with the smell of ozone and burning chemicals, making it difficult to breathe. Mesmerized and concerned, Betty Cash stepped out of the Oldsmobile to get a better look. She stood in the road, shielded only by the car door, as the intense heat beat down on her. The object was massive, silver metallic, and periodically belched blue flames like a giant welding torch. She felt a strange prickling sensation across her skin. Inside the car, Vicky and Colby were screaming. The young boy was terrified, convinced they were going to be burned alive. Vicky tried to comfort him, but she too was paralyzed by the sight of the roaring machine. The sound was a deep, low-frequency thrumming that vibrated through the chassis and into their very bones. As the diamond craft began to rise slowly, a new sound filled the air, the heavy thwack-thwack of rotor blades. From every direction, twin-rotor CH-47 Chinook helicopters appeared. They counted 23 in total. The helicopters seemed to be surrounding the craft, acting as an organized military escort as it moved toward the horizon. Once the sky cleared, the trio sat in stunned silence. The car was still radiating heat. Betty's skin felt like it was on fire and her eyes were stinging. They managed to drive the rest of the way home. But the physical effects of the encounter were already beginning to manifest in ways they couldn't yet understand. By the time they reached Vicky's house, everyone was feeling deathly ill. They were struck by intense nausea and vomiting. Betty, who had spent the most time outside the car, was the most severely affected. Her skin was turning a deep, angry red, as if she had been exposed to hours of direct, unfiltered desert sun. During the night, the situation turned gruesome. Large, water-filled blisters began to form on Betty's face and arms. Her eyes swelled shut, and she fell into a state of semi-consciousness. Vicky and Colby also suffered from skin irritation and diarrhea, though their symptoms were slightly less severe than Betty's. Betty's condition worsened so rapidly that she was admitted to Parkway General Hospital. Doctors were baffled. She presented symptoms of extreme thermal burns combined with something more sinister. She was suffering from acute radiation poisoning, a diagnosis usually reserved for victims of nuclear accidents or atomic blasts. Within days of the incident, another terrifying symptom appeared. Betty's hair began to fall out in large clumps. This classic sign of radiation exposure confirmed that the craft had emitted more than just heat. It had bathed the witnesses in invisible high-energy particles that were destroying their cells from the inside out. Medical professionals struggled to treat Betty. Her white blood cell count plummeted, and her immune system was failing. So the doctors noted that her injuries were consistent with ionizing radiation, but there was no record of any nuclear leakage in the area. The source of her trauma remained officially unidentified. Once Betty was stable enough to speak, the group decided to report what they had seen. They contacted the U.S. Air Force, believing that the presence of the Chinook helicopters proved the government was involved. They wanted answers, and more importantly, they wanted someone to take responsibility for their mounting medical bills. The Air Force and the Army conducted a preliminary investigation. However, the results were frustratingly negative. Officials claimed that no military helicopters were operating in the Huffman area on the night of December 29th. They insisted that the diamond craft did not exist in any government inventory. The incident caught the attention of UFO investigators and the press. John Schuessler, a project manager at McDonnell Douglas, took a personal interest in the case. He spent years documenting the medical evidence, interviewing witnesses, and trying to track down the mysterious helicopters that the trio had seen. Despite the government's denials, investigators found physical traces. There were reports of damaged trees and scorched pavement in the area where the object had hovered. Furthermore, other witnesses in the region reported seeing the same fleet of helicopters, lending credibility to the trio's story of a massive military operation. In 1982, represented by attorney Peter Gersten, the witnesses filed a $20 million lawsuit against the U.S. government. They alleged that the craft was an experimental nuclear-powered vehicle belonging to the military and that the government's negligence had caused their permanent health damage. The legal battle was uphill from the start. To win, the plaintiffs had to prove that the craft belonged to the United States. The government maintained a not ours defense, and without a serial number or a recovered piece of the craft, the burden of proof was nearly impossible to meet for three private citizens. In 1986, a district court judge dismissed the lawsuit. The ruling stated that since the plaintiffs could not prove the craft was owned or operated by the U.S. government, the military could not be held liable. The witnesses were left with no compensation and a lifetime of chronic health issues. Young Colby, who was only 7 at the time of the incident, carried the scars into adulthood. He suffered from recurring nightmares and a lifelong fear of the dark. His physical health remained fragile, and he often wondered why his childhood had been stolen by a silent, burning diamond in the sky. Betty Cash's health never fully recovered. She suffered from various forms of cancer and chronic skin problems for the rest of her life. She became a symbol of the physical trace UFO cases, proving that these encounters weren't just lights in the sky, they could have devastating physical consequences. Skeptics argued that the group might have seen a chemical fire or a mirage, but scientists countered that mirages don't cause hair loss and third-degree burns. The presence of the Chinooks remained the smoking gun, suggesting the event was a secret black-budget project that went dangerously wrong. Betty Cash passed away on December 29, 1998, exactly 18 years to the day after the incident. She died without ever receiving an apology or an explanation from the government. The story remains one of the most credible and harrowing accounts of a close encounter of the second kind. The Cash-Landrum Incident is still studied by researchers today. It remains unique because of the extensive medical documentation and the sheer number of military assets involved. It serves as a reminder that the skies hold secrets that are sometimes as dangerous as they are mysterious. Was it an alien visitor in distress or a top-secret nuclear propulsion test? While the diamond craft has never been seen again, the questions it raised about government transparency and unexplained aerial phenomena continue to haunt the piney woods of Texas and the world of ufology.